Hi, I'm just here doing the service and check over on your 2015 RZR 570 Trail EPS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the items on the check over list that need attention. And the other things, you can assume that I've either they're okay or they're okay right now. I have not gotten to them. I have done most of the things on the list. There's a couple of things that I have to do with the bike running and driving and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, so the oil filter and oil change is done. Front differential fluid is done. Both of those fluids were a touch milky, and usually can get that with either water leaking in or condensation or something like that. But anyway, they're both been changed, so they're good now. Air filter. So I'm going to recommend, since you're starting a new season, that we put a new air filter in. Normally this filter probably could go a little while longer, but the issue that I find with this one is I'm not sure that it was actually seated in here properly. And you can see all the dirt and stuff that's in your air box. That's all on the engine side of the air filter. So this air filter sets in here like this. So my issue is there shouldn't be that much dirt in your air box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean all that dust and debris and everything else is laying down around there in the bottom of the air box, and we're going to put a new air filter in it that we know is sealing properly. And if you look around here on the edges, you can see maybe over here in this corner that maybe that filter was leaking there a bit. I'm not sure, but I also can see that there's dirt going into the air intake and right into the throttle body of your engine. So we want to see if we can make sure that's not happening anymore, because one of the biggest problems with ATV and side-by-side engines failure is dirt ingestion. So we don't want that to happen to you, so we're going to fix that up. Next, let's see. So we'll get to their front differential fluid. Your rear transaxle fluid. So this bike doesn't have a rear differential. It has a transmission in the back end, and the axles go right into that. And it's all sort of an integrated unit, I guess. That's your check plug for hours and time. So every 100 hours or 12 months, this bike is due for a change of the AGL fluid in the transmission. It's about 15 minutes to change it, and then just the cost of the fluid. I charge by the milliliter because I keep it here in stock. So instead of you having to buy 2 bottles and only using 1.3 liters at a 2, you only have to pay for the 1,300 milliliters it actually goes into it. I think that's what goes into these, 1,300 or 1,400 milliliters. But anyway, I would recommend changing that. Have not run the bike up to operating temperature to test the cooling fan yet, so we're just going to skip that for now. If there's an issue with it not working or the cooling system not working properly, then I'll let you know. But I will give you a little tip. It's always a good idea to keep your radiator cleaned out if you've been in a lot of mud or anything like that. You want to make sure all the little fins in the radiator are decently clean. It doesn't have to be spotless for sure. Do not use a high pressure washer on an aluminum fin radiator. They bend very easily. There's all kinds of tips on the internet on how to clean radiators out. I try not to give advice on that, but it is a good idea to keep it cleaned out. And Polaris has made yours a little bit easier to get at, because they have these 2 little tabs, and that panel actually comes out, so you can look right in there and you can see the radiator. And you can see where some of those little aluminum fins are probably bent over just from stones or something else getting in through and poking at the radiator. But anyway, that's a little tip for you. Next, coolant level in the reservoir bottle or the overflow bottle or the expansion bottle, whatever you want to call it, was down below the minimum mark. So that's down here by my fingernail. It was down around here somewhere. and I've topped it up. And I also made sure that your radiator was full, so I took the cap off. That's why you can see that it's a little wet here. I've taken the cap off and made sure the radiator was topped up. So you always want to make sure that the coolant level in the bottle is between the minimum and the maximum mark. It doesn't have to stay on one or the other because the level changes depending on what the temperature is. And actually, when we get warm enough, you might find that now it'll go a little bit over the maximum amount. It just depends on ambient temperature and the temperature of the bike and all that sort of thing. So just keep it from going below the minimum mark. Battery. So this bike has a Kimpex battery in it. It's not the original that was in this bike, and I know that for sure because it's the wrong battery. This battery is smaller than what it's supposed to be in this bike. So this bike usually takes I think it's called a YIX30L or something like that. So it's a battery that fills up a lot of that hole that one's sitting in. And usually I'll see this on a 570 that has EPS, because someone who might go to their local dealer and say, hey, I need a battery for a RZR 570, and they give them one for a RZR 570, but your bike is a RZR 570 Trail with electric power steering, and you're supposed to have a bigger battery in this bike. So the cold cranking amps on this battery are rated 210. The battery that's supposed to be in it is 300. So it'll also give you issues, cold starts when you get into cold weather and stuff like that. It wears on this battery. You always want to make sure the battery is properly sized to the bike, so it's providing the proper amount to voltage and current to all the little sensors and the ECU and the fuel injection system and everything like that, and the ignition system when the bike's starting up. So anyway, that's something that I would recommend replacing as well. You want to make sure you have the right battery in it. And in the long term, if you do not have one, I would recommend having a battery maintainer. So not exactly, it's a charger maintainer, so they charge up and they keep the battery at the proper level of charge. They don't overcharge, and they make it so that your battery stays healthy, so you don't have to spend $300 every year on a new battery. So anyway, you can get kits. They connect the one part of it's like a split wire plug. So part of it stays connected to the battery all the time, and then there's a little plug, and the battery charger maintainer plugs into that. And that way you can, when you're not using the bike, you can plug it in. When you want to take your bike for a ride, you just unplug it and put your seat back, or you actually don't have to have your seat off or anything like that. You just have your plug sort of hanging out here. But anyway, that's something else that I would recommend having. Let's see. Now we're going to go up in the air, get to the rest of the things. Sorry for the little pause as we raise it up so I don't have to stoop. Hopefully that's about where we need it to be. Let's go down my list. So some of the stuff I'm going to be bouncing around here a little bit. On both sides in the back, you need new, you have play in them. I would suggest changing them now as opposed to changing them next fall, because I don't think you'll get that far before they start being a lot more wear in them than they are now. Bushings and sleeves. So there's a sleeve inside, and there's a sort of like a nylon plastic type bushing on either end. Cylindrical sleeve inside of it that the bolt runs through the center of. You have wear in the top and the bottom on both sides. And I might be able to show you if we put my camera about like this. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a hold of the wheel, and I'm going to move it back and forth. And you're going to see this aluminum bearing carrier moving independent of your control arm. And you can see where they're starting to get some play in them. The other thing that you'll see on this one, on this side of the bike, is, if I can get it to do it right, you'll see that you might be able to see in the video that the axle boot, the CV joint boot right here, moves independent of the bearing carrier before the bearing carrier moves. And that's because your wheel bearing is wore. So I'd recommend replacing that guy on that side. So back into the bike, bushings and sleeves in both the bearing carriers, and right side wheel bearing. Let's see. On the front of the bike, once again, if we were in getting close to the end of the year or something like that, I might say you can go a little bit further, but I would suggest changing these now. You're getting some play in your upper ball joints, and that's on both sides of the bike. And I'm not going to try and show you that, but you'll have to trust me. And that's on that one as well. Just give me a second here. Got the wheel bearing. I just want to point it out to you as well that the U-joints in this bike have been replaced, and that's not an uncommon wear part in any ATV or side-by-side. And yours now, they have greasable joints, so the stock ones don't have a grease nipple on them, so you can't grease them, so I've greased that. What I did notice on the back end, not on the front, because there's a U-joint and a yoke. This is the yoke, and it slides onto the spline transmission shaft. You're getting starting to get some play in that yoke. It's not a lot yet, but just something to recheck again the next service, just to see how much wear it gets in it. I always make sure to keep these greased up, because there's a grease nipple on here as well, because they move in and out a little bit as the bike is riding and as the prop shaft is spinning, so it's always good to keep them greased. Let's see. Sorry for the pause. Airbox, battery, and you're already on top of your tires, so we're not going to touch on that. I did mention to you, I think, on the phone that the back tires were quite low on air, so they are all set. I usually, this in the winter time, this time of the year, because of the fact that the shop is nice and warm and outside it's cold, I usually set them a pound or two over the spec, because of course when you go outside into cold air, the pressure goes down in your tires. So I like to try to make it so it's going to end up close to what you need, especially if you're driving it in the winter time. Not sure if we touched on this yet, but by hours, and I think I did. Transmission fluids due to be changed. That's it for that stuff. Now we're into your clutches and your belt. So you need a new belt. Say that right off the mark. You can see the wear on the belt. See this edge on this side of the belt is relatively sharp still. You go over to this side and it's all rounded, because this has been probably worn for a little while. You also have spots in it where it's cracked. So if I open up that, you can see where that belt is split. So it's not going to get you a long ways. So we're going to replace that. And for the clutches themselves, we're going to blow them out with compressed air. Just 1 second. Sorry, I have somebody at the door. We're going to blow those out with compressed air and fix that up for you. The clutches themselves aren't in bad shape. Let's see. I checked your rollers and your spider on the clutch and your weight pins. They're all good till you check again in another 50 hours. I think that is all of the things that I found that needed to have attention done to them. And like I had suggested to you before, I'll also add in a bumper stop for your winch cable up here in the front on the estimate. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll be talking to you soon. Have a great day.